Hi guys, my name is Nahid. In today's class, we'll be discussing a chapter from class 9's book, that is Beehive. The name of the chapter is My Childhood, which is a fraction of the autobiography that was written by APJ Abdul Kalam named as Wings of Fire. So we'll be discussing this chapter solely today, which is prescribed for both CBSE and SEBA students. Before I start the chapter, I must tell you that there are students who ask me for notes. Please go subscribe to my Telegram channel. I post all the notes out there which you can easily access. Sometimes I put the text out there. Sometimes I give PDF or Word files which you can easily access if you have an Android phone. So with that, let's start this chapter, My Childhood. The name of the chapter is My Childhood, which suggests that Mera Bachpan. In this chapter, APJ Abdul Kalam will be talking about his upbringing, about his parents, about how his mother was, and the society that he was in. Also, this chapter, this fraction will reflect religious harmony between Hindu and Muslims, which you will see in a small town called Rameshwaram. So before we read first point first, you can see in here, can you think of any scientist who has also been a statesman? We already know this. किसी ऐसे साइंटिस्ट के बारे में क्या हम सोच सकते हैं जो देश के लिए काम कर चुके हैं या देश की सर्विस में रह चुके हैं, एग्जीक्यूटिव डिपार्टमेंट में रह चुके हैं, तो एपीजे अब्दुल कलाम जी का नाम तो वी ऑलरेडी नो. एपीजे अब्दुल कलाम वाज प्रोजेक्ट्स, okay, his projects in space and all these other factors, they are very important. His projects in space, he has done some work in space, everybody knows he was a scientist. Defense and nuclear technology guided India into the 21st century. So he was a revolutionary guy. He, because of his endeavors, because of what he had done, it guided India towards 21st century, and he was our 11th president, as you can see here. Point number 3, in his autobiography, Wings of Fire, he speaks of his childhood. So that's a chapter from his autobiography. The name of his autobiography is Wings of Fire, and it's a chapter, probably the first chapter that has been taken here as your chapter. In this chapter, you will learn a lot about how simple he was and how simple his family members were. Also, you will learn religious harmony that he speaks of Rameshwaram and Hindu-Muslim unity and everything else. So let's begin the chapter. I was born in a middle-class Tamil family in the island of Rameshwaram. Okay, so he was born in this island. Name of the island is Rameshwaram, and it's in Madras. Erstwhile here means former, as you can see on the right hand side. So it was in Madras state. It is in Madras state. So he was born there in that island. You already know what an island is. He says, my father, 𝒍𝒊𝒒, that's the name of his father, you should know. 𝒍𝒊𝒒, and he had neither much formal education nor wealth. So he didn't have much of a formal education. He did not have much wealth. He was not a rich man. Despite these disadvantages, he possessed great innate wisdom and a true generosity of spirit. Even after his father didn't have formal education, his father didn't have much wealth, but even after that, he possessed, even after that, this man, his father, he possessed great innate wisdom. It means something that's inborn quality that somebody has, and a true generosity of spirit means he was a very kind human being. He had an ideal helpmate in my mother. His mother's name was Ashiyamma. Here you can see it. You should remember that as well. And she was an ideal helpmate, means she helped his father in every regard. I don't recall the exact number of people she fed every day. So his mother used to feed many people in their family, but I'm quite in their family here means apart from the family members. Okay, she did feed the family members, but apart from the family members, she fed many people throughout the day. And he says he cannot really exactly remember the name, because his mother used to feed a lot of people, poor and people who do not have a lot of money. But I am quite certain that far more outsiders ate with us. You see, here he says far more outsiders ate with him than all the family members put together. So he remembers eating food with more with outsiders than with his own family members, which suggests that his mother was a very kind woman who used to feed poor people. Second paragraph, if you see, I was one of many children. So his parents had many children. He was one of them, and he was a short boy, as he is describing himself. He said he was a short boy, and he had rather undistinguished looks. It means the way he looked, it was not appealing. and born to tall and handsome parents. But it was not like his parents were tall. His mother was quite tall. So even after that, he could not get those inherited qualities from his parents. We lived in our ancestral house, which is the house of their grandparents. That's where they lived, which was built in the middle of 19th century. So this house that they lived in, it was built in the middle of 19th century, which would be somewhere between 1950s. It was a fairly large pucca house. So his house was pucca house, made out of bricks and everything else, made out of limestone and brick. As you can see, what pucca house mean, it means something that made out of limestone and brick. We see a lot of houses like this in our locality as well, and their house was on the mosque street in Rameshwaram. So in the Rameshwaram, they had a mosque, and in the mosque street they had their house, which was their ancestral house. Then you can see something very vital here. My austere father, you see, austere means very simple, strict to rules, do not like to keep luxurious things do not like to entertain luxurious things in their life. So his father was an austere man, used to avoid all inessential comforts and luxuries. He did not believe in inessential comforts and luxuries, which could mean that having a sofa or a very much comfortable foamy bed. He did not encourage all those things. He believed that we should have as much as we need to survive. However, all the necessities were provided for, but his father, though he was a very austere man, very strict man, but he provided all the necessities that they needed in their family. In terms of what necessities his father fulfilled, as you can see, food, medicine, clothes, all these things his father provided them whenever they needed them. In fact, I would say mine was a very secure childhood. He says his childhood was a very secure childhood, means it was a safe and comfortable childhood that he had, both materially and emotionally. So he had all the things he needed, not inessential, but the essential things he needed, he had all of them. And he says his childhood was emotionally secure. It means he got a lot of emotional support from his parents. Okay, now that we've read 2 paragraphs, let's go to para number 3. As you can see here, the Second World War broke out in 1939. So that's something you should remember, that comes in history as well. Second World War broke out in 1939, and First World War broke out in 1914. So that's something you should remember. When I was 8 years old, so APJ Abdul Kalam, when Second World War broke out, he was only 8 years old. That's something you should remember here as well. For reasons I have never been able to understand, a sudden demand of tamarind seeds erupted in the market. Tamarind, I hope you know what a tamarind is. I'll pop up a picture here on the screen so that you understand it. Tamarind seeds. Tamarind is a kind of, I would say, a fruit. And the seed of that fruit, demand of the seed of that particular fruit increased in the market of Rameshwaram. So I used to collect the seeds and sell them into a provisional shop on Mosque Street. So he said he used to collect all the tamarind seeds, and he used to sell them in a provisional, like a normal shop in his street, and a day's collection would fetch me princely sum of 1 anna. So by selling all the seeds, he would earn 1 anna a day, which was a good amount of money in those times for a kid. Now we will know a little about his brother-in-law. As you can see, my brother-in-law Jalaluddin, as you can see here, you should underline that too, would tell me stories about the war, which I would later attempt to trace in the headlines of Dinamani. So what is a Dinamani? Dinamani is a name of a newspaper. So his brother-in-law would tell him stories long before they were published in the newspapers. Maybe he worked as a journalist in the newspaper. So this is the name of the newspaper, as you can see here, Dinamani. And he would tell him the stories about what's happening in the world, because it was Second World War, and what's happening in the world. He would tell him, and later on the next day you would find all these evidences in the newspaper. Our area being isolated means quite alone. Their area was alone, means it was an island, so it was not affected. It's completely unaffected by the war, he says. So it means where APJ Abdul Kalam lived is island Rameshwaram. They were not affected by Second World War. But soon India was forced to join the Allied forces, and India then joined Allied forces. We know a little about that because we read history, and if I will throw some light into it when you go to the next class and we discuss history. So India joined Allied forces. There was a force with some other countries to fight the World War, and in the state, the president declared emergency. The first casualty came in the form of the suspension of the train halt. So because of the Allied forces and because of the announcement of emergency, the first thing that happened was train did not stop in Rameshwaram station. So the train did not, earlier it used to stop there. There was this station trains used to stop there, but now because of the emergency, trains do not stop there. So what's happening because of that? Let's find out. The newspapers now had to be bundled and thrown out of the moving train on the Rameshwaram road between Rameshwaram and 𝒉𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒚. So these are the two places, Rameshwaram to 𝒉𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒚. In between these two places, newspapers now are thrown as bundled, and because trains don't stop there, newspapers, you have to read newspapers, otherwise how will you know what's happening in the world? So newspapers had to be thrown, bundled out in between these two places. That forced my cousin Samsuddin. Now he talks about his cousin. The name of his cousin was Samsuddin, who distributed newspapers in Rameshwaram to look for a helping hand to catch the bundles. So Samsuddin was a news distributor, like a newsboy, a news vendor, I would say. So his cousin wanted some help to collect the bundles of the newspapers because they were thrown between these two stations. So he needed somebody to collect the newspapers. As if naturally I filled in the slot, he says, and naturally I was there. I filled in the slot. It means like he helped his cousin in collecting the bundled newspapers. Samsuddin helped me earn my first wages. Now he says, it is due to my cousin Samsuddin I earned my first wages. Means the first time जब हम पैसे कमाते हैं अपनी ज़िंदगी में, बहुत खुशी होती है अपने मेहनत से. Half a century later, मतलब almost 50 years हो गए हैं, I can still feel the surge pride, like a ingoing blood flow of pride in my body, because I earned my own money for the first time. So he feels it very much. He becomes overwhelmed by thinking कि उन समसुद्दीन के कज़न की वजह से उन्होंने पहली बार जो है पैसे कमाए, अपने खुद के पैसे कमाए उन्होंने. So पहली बार जब हम पैसे कमाते हैं, हम सबको ये बात बहुत ज़्यादा याद रहती है. Okay, let's go to para 4. Every child is born with some inherited characteristics. यहाँ पे APJ अब्दुल कलाम कह रहे हैं कि हर बच्चा जो है वो कुछ इनहेरिटेड कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स लेके पैदा होता है. मतलब वो कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स जो हमें अपने पेरेंट्स से मिलता है. इनटू अ स्पेसिफिक सोशियो इकोनॉमिक एंड इमोशनल इन्वायरमेंट. तो हमारा जन्म एक सोशियो इकोनॉमिक एक सोसाइटी में होता है, जहाँ पे एक इमोशनल इन्वायरमेंट में हमारा जन्म होता है, जहाँ पे लोग जैसे रहते हैं वैसे ही हम बनते हैं. एंड ट्रेंड इन सर्टन वेज बाय फिगर्स ऑफ द अथॉरिटी. और वहाँ पे जो लोग पावर में रहते हैं उनके एंडिवर से ही हम ट्रेन होते हैं द वे वी वांट, लाइक हमारे सोसाइटी के मुताबिक ही हम बनते हैं. दैट्स व्हाट ही वांट्स टू से हियर. नाउ यू वुड से दैट अपने पेरेंट्स से उनको क्या मिला? आई इनहेरिटेड ऑनेस्टी. दो चीज़ें उनको मिला, ठीक है. ऑनेस्टी और सेल्फ डिसिप्लिन ही लर्न फ्रॉम हिज फादर. एंड उनके माँ से उन्होंने क्या सीखा? देखो, इनहेरिटेड फेथ इन गुडनेस एंड डीप काइंडनेस. फेथ और काइंडनेस, ये दो चीज़ें उन्होंने अपने माँ से उठाया, मतलब माँ से उनको मिला. सो डिड माई 3 brothers and sisters. ये सिर्फ उनको नहीं मिला, उनके बाकी 3 भाई और बहनों को भी मिला, बिकॉज दे वर मैनी चिल्ड्रन. I had 3 close friends. Now he would talk about his childhood friends. 3 close friends. I will mark it for you so that you can mark as well in your book. So his 3 friends were, as you can see here, Ramanatha Sastri, Aravinda and Sriva Prakashan. So all these boys were from Orthodox Hindu Brahmin families. So his friends were Hindu Brahmins. Now this is where Hinduism comes. This is where the religious harmony that I spoke in the beginning, now you will get a glimpse of that. So these boys were from Orthodox Brahmin family. What do I mean by that? Orthodox Brahmin family here means these boys were from a very strict Brahmin family where they followed the strict rules of Hinduism. Let's see, were there any segregations in terms of children? As children, none of us ever felt any difference amongst ourselves. So he says, as children, they never felt that like there was something like you are Hindu and I'm a Muslim. They never felt anything like that. And as our religious differences and upbringing, so they did not ever feel the religious differences, and while they were growing up. In fact, Ramanatha Sastri was the son of Pakshi Lakshmana Sastri. So he was the son of Pakshi Lakshmana Sastri, and who he was? ही वॉज द हाई प्रीस्ट, मतलब मंदिर के सबसे बड़े पुजारी का बेटा था रामानादा शास्त्री, जो रामेश्वरम टेम्पल था उसके पुजारी का बेटा था। लेटर ही टुक ओवर द प्रीस्टहुड ऑफ रामेश्वरम टेम्पल फ्रॉम हिज फादर। उसके बाद अपने पापा के मृत्यु के बाद, या फिर पापा जब रिटायर्ड हो गए, देन उनका जो ये दोस्त है, उसका नाम रामानादा शास्त्री है, अपने पिताजी उनके प्रीस्ट थे, तो वो भी ही टुक ओवर द प्रीस्टहुड, मतलब वो खुद जो है प्रीस्ट बने अपने पापा के बाद। ओके, लेट्स लीड आफ्टर फादर। अरविंद वेंट इनटू द बिजनेस ऑफ अरेंजिंग ट्रांसपोर्ट फॉर पिलग्रिमेज। उनका जो दूसरा दोस्त था उनका नाम था अरविंद्र, वो कहाँ पे चला गया था? वो ट्रांसपोर्टेशन एकोमोडेशन कराता था, ट्रांसपोर्ट एकोमोडेशन कराता था। जैसे लोग हज में जाते हैं या फिर किसी भी पिलग्रिमेज में, तीर्थ यात्रा पे जो लोग जाते हैं, जो पिलग्रिम्स उनको ही कहते हैं जो धर्म यात्रा में जाते हैं, उनके लिए ट्रांसपोर्टेशन का व्यवस्था वो कराते थे। तो अरविंद वेंट इनटू दैट बिजनेस। एंड लास्टली शिव प्रकाशन जो उनके दोस्त थे, ही बिकेम अ कैटरिंग कॉन्ट्रैक्टर फॉर द साउदर्न रेलवे। सो साउदर्न रेलवे में वो कैटरिंग कॉन्ट्रैक्टर बन गए। कैटरिंग मीन्स खाना वाना ये सब जो रेलवे में सप्लाई होता है उसके कॉन्ट्रैक्टर वो बन गए। और हम सबको पता है कि APJ अब्दुल कलाम क्या बने। ओके, लेट्स नॉट टॉक अबाउट दैट। ड्यूरिंग दी एनुअल, अभी यहाँ पे एक फेस्टिवल के बारे में बात करेंगे क्योंकि दे लिव विद द हिंदूज एंड देयर वाज दिस रिलीजियस हार्मनी। लेट्स टॉक अबाउट इट। ड्यूरिंग द एनुअल श्री सीतारामा कल्याणम, ठीक है, ये एक फेस्टिवल है, यू नीड टू अंडरलाइन दैट। श्री सीतारामा कल्याणम सेरेमनी, आवर फैमिली यूज्ड टू arrange boats with special platform for carrying idols of the Lord from the temple to the marriage site. तो श्री सीतारामा कल्याणम is like the marriage ceremony between Ram and सीता। तो ये फेस्टिवल वो लोग बनाते थे, और इस फेस्टिवल के लिए जो आइडल्स होते थे, जो मूर्ति होते थे, उनको ले जाना पड़ता था एक जगह से दूसरी जगह में। और ये ले जाने के लिए जो नाव होता है, जो बोट्स, एज यू कैन सी हियर, जो बोट्स होते थे, वो बोट्स जो हैं APJ अब्दुल कलाम के फैमिली उनके लिए मुहैया कराते थे। मीन्स दे यूज्ड टू मेक एंड प्रिपेयर द बोट्स फॉर देम। सिचुएटेड इन द मिडल ऑफ द पॉन्ड कॉल्ड रामा तीर्था। तो ये जगह एक पॉन्ड के बिल्कुल बीचों बीच में था, जहाँ आइडल्स को ले जाने के लिए दे नीडेड बोट्स। सो ये जो रामा तीर्था है, बीच वाले जगह को रामा तीर्था कहते हैं, वहाँ तक ले जाने के लिए उनको जो है बोट चाहिए होता था। एंड APJ अब्दुल कलाम का फैमिली वो बोट जो है मुहैया कराता था। इवेंट्स फ्रॉम द रामायण एंड फ्रॉम द लाइफ ऑफ प्रॉफिट। तो कह रहे हैं कि जब वो बच्चे जब वो बचपन में सोते थे, जो लोरिया जो होते हैं, ललाबाइस जिनको हम कहते हैं। सो इवेंट्स फ्रॉम रामायण के इवेंट्स एंड लाइफ ऑफ प्रॉफिट, मतलब हमारे जो मोहम्मद प्रॉफिट हैं, वेयर द बेड टाइम स्टोरीज माई मदर एंड ग्रैंड मदर वुड टेल द चिल्ड्रन इन आवर फैमिली। तो हमारे फैमिली के जो बच्चे थे उनको हमारी जो माई मदर एंड माई ग्रैंड मदर, APJ अब्दुल कलाम कह रहे हैं कि रामायण की कहानियाँ सुनाते थे जब हम जाते थे, एज लोरी और एज लाइक स्टोरीज़। एंड प्रॉफिट मोहम्मद के भी कहानियाँ सुनाते थे। तो पैरेलल ये दोनों कहानियाँ जो हैं सुनाया जाता था जब वो मतलब सोने जाते थे। उसके बाद यहाँ पे 6 नंबर पैराग्राफ में पढ़ते हैं। वन डे व्हेन आई वाज इन द 5th स्टैंडर्ड एट द रामेश्वरम एलिमेंट्री स्कूल। तो जब वो 5th स्टैंडर्ड में थे, 5वीं कक्षा में जब थे, कहाँ पे थे? रामेश्वरम स्कूल में जब थे, तो वहाँ पे कुछ हुआ था। न्यू टीचर केम टू आवर क्लास। एक नया बंदा आया, नया टीचर आया। जैसे तुम लोग क्लास में नया टीचर आता है तो यू गाइस, सम ऑफ यू बिकम वेरी एक्साइटेड एंड सम ऑफ यू जस्ट लाइक टू टीच। आई यूज्ड टू वेयर अ कैप विच मार्क मी एज अ मुस्लिम। तो वो जो है कैप लगाते थे, जिसको हम लोग हमारे इधर के सिलेटी लैंग्वेज में कहते हैं तोकी। सो सैक्रेड पवित्र, तो जो जिससे पता चलता था कि वो मुस्लिम है। एंड आई ऑलवेज सैट इन द फ्रंट रो नेक्स्ट टू रामानादा शास्त्री। और फ्रंट रो में मतलब पहले वाले बेंच में वो बैठते थे रामानादा शास्त्री के साथ। हु वोर सैक्रेड थ्रेड, ये जो ब्राह्मण लोग लगाते हैं, देखना अपने बदन में एक ऐसे करके एक क्या बोलते हैं, एक थ्रेड लगाते हैं, वो एक सूता लगाते हैं, नायलन का होता है गैस, जिससे इनको पता चलता है कि दे आर लाइक द ब्राह्मण्स। ब्राह्मण का एक सिग्निफिकेंट दैट वाज इट्स लाइक अ मार्क। द न्यू टीचर कुड नॉट स्टमक अ हिंदू प्रीस्ट सन सिटिंग विद अ मुस्लिम बॉय। नया टीचर जो था उसको बड़ा ही ज़्यादा मतलब ही कुड नॉट, उसके दिमाग में ये सहन नहीं हुआ कि एक हिंदू प्रीस्ट का लड़का एक मुस्लिम लड़के के साथ बैठा हुआ है। समझ रहे हो? जो टिपिकल जो एक थॉट प्रोसेस होता है किसी के माइंड के अंदर। इन अकॉर्डेंस विद आवर सोशल रैंकिंग एज द न्यू टीचर सो इट, आई वॉज आस्क्ड टू गो एंड सिट ऑन द बैक बेंच। तो नए टीचर ने नया सोशल रैंकिंग बना लिया और APJ अब्दुल कलाम को जो है पिछले वाले बेंच में जाके बैठने के लिए बोला। आई फेल्ट वेरी सैड, सो डिड रामानादा शास्त्री। उनको बहुत ज़्यादा दुख फील हुआ और रामानादा शास्त्री को भी बहुत ज़्यादा दुख फील हुआ। He looked utterly downcast as I shifted to my seat in the last row. जब मैं लास्ट रो में जा रहा था, वो कह रहे हैं, जब मैं लास्ट रो में जा रहा था तो मेरा जो दोस्त था, he was looking downcast. Downcast मतलब नीचे की तरफ देख रहा था. He was crying. He was feeling very very sad when he was going to the last row, last bench में जब जा रहा था, क्योंकि कभी उनके साथ ऐसा नहीं हुआ. They used to sit together and there was nothing like this. कभी ये बात आया भी नहीं. The image of him weeping when I shifted to the last row left a lasting impression on me. कह रहे हैं कि जो इमेज, वो जो जब वो जा रहे थे एंड वो बच्चा रो रहा था, इसका आज भी उनके दिमाग में एक लास्टिंग इम्प्रेशन पड़ा हुआ है. मीन्स आज भी वो ऐसा सोचते हैं कि एक हिंदू मेरे लिए खड़ा हुआ था. लाइक वी वर गुड फ्रेंड्स इन दिस. इट टेल्स यू अबाउट द रिलीजियस हार्मनी दैट वी हैव. इन रियल सेंस में जितने भी मुस्लिम हैं, जितने भी हिंदूस हैं, हम सब एक ही हैं. लाइक द आम आदमी, आम जनता जो है, किसी से कोई हेट नहीं करता है, ऐसा कुछ है नहीं. एटलीस्ट मुझे ऐसा लगता है. एनीवेज, तो जब वो गए थे, वो कह रहे कि ये जो इम्प्रेशन है उसके रोने का, वो उनके साथ बहुत समय तक रहा. एवरी टाइम ही वॉज अलोन, वो इसके बारे में सोचते थे. कभी कभार उनको ये चीज़ें याद आती थी. सो विद दैट ये पार्ट 1 यहीं पे मैं ख़त्म करता हूँ. पार्ट 2 नेक्स्ट वीडियो में मैं डाल दूँगा. बट बिफोर आई लेट यू गो, मैं कह लेता हूँ कि नोट्स जिन लोगों को चाहिए मुझे बोलते हैं कमेंट्स में, तो यू सब्सक्राइब टू माई टेलीग्राम चैनल. इसका लिंक यहाँ नीचे दिया हुआ है. एज यू कैन सी, इंस्टाग्राम भी सेम मेरा आईडी है और टेलीग्राम में भी सेम मेरा आईडी. वहाँ पे जाओ, जाके उसको ज्वाइन कर लो और जो भी नोट्स में अपडेट्स वहाँ पे दूंगा तुम्हें मिल जाएगा. उसमें कुछ एक्स्ट्रा चीज़ें भी मिल सकते हैं. तो ठीक है, वहाँ पे जाके करो. एंड आई विल सी यू इन द नेक्स्ट वीडियो. बाय बाय.